back in after that.
Okay,
Jennifer.
thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming in, and I admire all your work in totally different ways. You know, I'm delighted to see you here today. And Maria, I think we saw each other last at the Parliamentary Forum, actually, and we were speaking yesterday in the Oireachtas Justice Committee on Places of Detention. Ivana and I co-chair the Penal Reform Group within the Oireachtas, and I was struck actually about something you'd said a while back about how traveller women were just invisible. Until the end of the conversation, I'd been in Limerick recently, and we spoke about the particular difficulty that IPRT have examined, identified the particular prejudice that faces traveller women in prisons, and get the huge overrepresentation of traveller women in prisons, and the particularly difficult circumstances that many of them have found to get in there. But that's a very negative. It's only that was Tuesday, so I don't mean to start with something negative, but it's just that it didn't come up at all, and I was thinking about you and what you'd said at the Parliamentary Forum. And in a different, much more positive way, I was thinking just as you were speaking there, I can't remember the last time I saw a traveller woman on TV, and I don't know whether it's that I don't watch much TV or what I've been missing, but just in the broader sort of cultural discussion, I just haven't seen it, and I think it's really important what you've highlighted today. Could I ask, just in relation to the women on air, I know it's been mentioned, and forgive me, I was in and out of my other committee, but I'd like to understand just a little bit more deeply why you think there are so few women on air, just a little bit more deeply. And if I could ask specifically of the 30% Club, one of the things that really concerns me is not so much board representation, but executive management representation and women at that level, because that's where decisions are made, that's where money is to be made, but also crucially that's where culture is set at senior management levels. There are two questions just to begin with, please. Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll go first, I think, to the 30% Club, because I'm conscious you didn't get in on the last round, Gillian, so you may wish to comment on some of the earlier exchange as well as Jennifer's question.
Yes, just to comment, one of the tenets of the 30% Club is always focusing on changing the system rather than feeling we always have to change the women. So in addition to the great work that Roisin does in training, we encourage senior women to make themselves available for comment, but we do think there is an onus on the media outlets to support the women being commented on in terms of the content that they present, rather than how they dressed or their accents. And we really see women being more likely to step up, which might partially answer your question, when they see the media outlets acting as allies for women as expert speakers, rather than women as tokenism, or, as I said, when you see somebody stepping out of their comfort zone and commenting on sport, for example, and being criticised in social media for their accent, it's great when the media outlet itself steps up and says we support them as experts, and that encourages more women to get involved. In terms of your point about women at executive level, we would support your view, absolutely. Our concern is that countries that have focused on quotas and quotas on boards have not done anything at all to improve the lot. And that's why within the 30% Club, we like to go on the basis of targets, because organisations that are accountable for targets almost have no choice but to look at executive level, because that's what they need to feed the pipeline. When the 30% Club started in the UK in 2010, it only focused on boards, and many of the chapters around the world did the same. When it came to Ireland in 2015, we saw that as a serious gap, mainly because we have a small number of listed boards. So we extended the remit in Ireland and said, actually, we want to focus on a minimum of 30% at C-suite as well. And the 30% Club globally has now retrofitted that into their initiative, because they've seen where we focused on it in Ireland. But it's absolutely the way to go. Decisions are made at board level in terms of governance and oversight. Yeah. But the critical strategic decisions, the culture of an organisation, the diversity approach in terms of customers, in terms of employees, in terms of procurement and wider stakeholders, that happens at the C-suite table, and we believe it's really important that women are equally represented, and it's more important that they be represented at that table, and that's what we work with Irish organisations to encourage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian, for that. Maria, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, no, again, I think it's really important to have the targets and to have the quotas and to be naming specifically. Because I just feel sometimes unless we specifically name traveller women, the issues impacting them will not get addressed.
Yeah.
Even, you know, in gender quotas, we need ethnic quotas, but we also need to be within those ethnic quotas, those nested ethnic quotas, having targets in the context of traveller women. Otherwise, political parties will not go the extra mile that they need to go in relation to ensuring that traveller women are, the efforts being made by the party, the resources being put into it, the time being put into it, the political and cultural shift that needs to change within the political parties, within the state, will not happen unless we have the naming specifically of traveller women in the context of quotas and targets. And just in relation to your point, Jennifer, in relation to, you know, we have over-representation of traveller women in prison, while we've under-representation across all of the issues we've spoken here today around. That doesn't happen by accident.
Not at all.
And research out of the University of Limerick that was launched just a few months ago showed that the culture of the criminal policing and the criminal justice system in this country is discriminatory, is, you know, in terms of the racism experienced by travellers, by policing and racial profiling, all lead to greater numbers in prison. Just like every other ethnic minority across the world are overrepresented in the prison systems. But also in the context of that, much of that in the context of women is short sentences.
Yes.
Is for fines.
Yes.
And we have
Yeah.
legislation
Yeah.
in this country that prohibits judges
Yes.
giving custodial sentences for fines.
Yeah.
And yet we're finding that there are traveller women in our prison systems with short sentencing, and for any woman going in short sentences, it makes no sense whatsoever. The entire family life is disrupted as primary carers, and also in terms of in for fines, which the judges should be ruling differently. But again, it's an example of the systemic racism in the context of our judiciary as well.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Listen, I came out of Limerick and I went straight to a journalist to try to highlight those figures again. I'd raised them in the Dáil with the Taoiseach. I'd raised them straight away. It's in the Limerick Post because for exactly that. Exactly, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut across you.
Thanks, Maria. That's very strong. Okay, Roisin, perhaps just to finish on that.
What I would say, why don't women step up to microphones? There are an awful lot of reasons why that is the case. Something that we have found a lot is an issue of confidence, or feeling that they don't know enough. They could have 2 PhDs in the subject, but they still feel that they don't know enough. Now, if I may, Ivana, I might ask Pat to give you a bit of a deeper dive into that, because Pat does the training and therefore is privy to the conversations around the women that we do train, where a lot of this is actually discussed.
Thanks, Roisin, and you've made a very good point. That is exactly the case that I have found women who might, in any area of their expertise, which they have, and all the people women that I've worked with, all have plenty to say, but their confidence level is much lower when it comes to media. So they will say to me, oh, you know, I need to work this out and I need to do more research and I need to do that, without, you know, being stereotypical, but a man will wing it more.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
They will wing it. And if somebody rings them, I've had people say to me, you know, and then say in a particular area, be it business or academia or whatever, organisation, if there are a lot of men there, the men tend to say, oh, the man will do that. And they promote the man. So it's a really good question, because that's the kind of things we want to look at if we're going to respond to this in the round, not just with, oh, increase the quotas, or, you know, we need to look at why, like, what are the issues that traveller women will face when they're coming on air or when they're asked to do something. Things that we don't even think about, like transport or whatever it is. You know, we just assume people can do certain things, but they mightn't be able to do it that way. So that's why it's really, when I found listening to women, that's what surprised me a lot, was the way that who promotes them, who pushes them, very little. It's like if you go into any talk and somebody gives a talk and there's men and women in the audience, questions. How many men's hands will go up for questions before? It's a good while. And then this brings me back to your point from the 30-30, which I think is really important, is that the more you see, and if the more women we can get on-air modelling, the more that will break down as well, because then people think, well, I can do that too. If she did that, I can do it. So there is that knock-on, particularly in the whole area of the sciences and STEM, you mentioned that, but across the board. And another issue that I think is important is that you talked about the criticism, that women get criticised for what they're wearing or what they're sounding like. Like, I remember, because I did work and produce radio and TV programmes myself, but lowering your voice, because there's this thing set that a woman's voice, oh, that squeaky voice, we don't want to hear it. And that was almost accepted. Some people in media went and got media training, and I did, to lower my voice. Yeah. I love now that there's been one or two women, and I'm sure you know them, who have been on air, whose voices are higher, whose voices are more young and vibrant and higher, and it now means, great, we don't have to go into that lower your voice thing. But that's something even as simple as that is important. So I think that whole unconscious level of bias and unconscious sexism is there, and even women themselves don't realise that they're actually suffering from it till they come together and sit down and talk. So that's why really doing this in a multi-strata approach, getting all the information so that you can respond to it at a whole lot of different levels, is really important.
Can I just add one very brief point to that? I think it goes beyond confidence for some groups of women. I think we can't, take away some of that negativity and hostility that's experienced by some groups of women, including traveller women, when it comes to the media. And if you've constantly, been on the receiving end of that, it does make it more difficult to try and engage in those spaces. And also, when at times you're coming in and it's at that point of where it's, you have to defend yourself, as opposed to being invited in to speak about wider issues that impact on us, not just as women, but as traveller, not just as traveller women, but as women in Irish society, I think is really important. And the other final piece I'll add to that whole piece is the online media and the online hatred and, license to just put anything in there. And even if you just look at articles and positive articles that can be written in some of the broadcasting, the print media, the amount of commentary that can come in under them that's so derogatory and negative and racist is unbelievable. So that online backlash into personal lives is a very significant issue as well.
Thanks.
It might be us. we know.
Yeah. Yeah.